Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. Usually you bring us in and don't even wait.
I'm looking forward to today. I'm just going to sit here quietly. May not say anything this whole time. I'm just going to let you two go for it.
Yeah, so I apologize for that awkward pause in the beginning. Usually I just black out and let Ben bring us in, but apparently it's my job today because I'm really excited. A really, really dear friend of mine is in today as we continue this preparedness series. We talk about, okay, how as parents, how as even individuals, even if you don't have a family, how can you make sure that you are prepared for worst case scenarios? How can you be prepared for just unforeseen circumstances that inevitably happen? It may not happen to you, but there are things that happen. And how do you prepare, and how are you ready to handle those situations when it happens? And so today we are going to be talking about preparing and having your home prepared for when disaster strikes, whether it be fire, whether it be, a medical emergency with your child. If you've got a pool, I know everybody in Texas, live in the pool in the summers. But how do you handle those things if your kids are just eating and if they choke on something, just a handful of things. And so we've got my dear friend, Captain Chris Caver, with the Carrollton Fire Department. And I want to hear kind of your story. You've got a really cool story, growing up and the example of what a father figure is. And he's just a great man. And I've gotten to know him as well. But I do want to brag on you. And so this man sitting to my right, I thought Ben was the most disciplined guy that I'd really been around. But this dude is
a shame, huh?
This dude. Yes. Okay. So we're down in South Texas at the river, and this is parents' weekend, have fun. It's like the ultimate Texas experience. You got country music concerts, you're floating the river. It's amazing, right? And this guy is taking 2 hours a day going back up to the house to study for his captain's test.
Oh, wow.
While we're all out there drinking ranch waters and floating in the river.
Just slumming it.
And no, he has the discipline to do that. And so, and again, that's very consistent with everything that he does. And so Chris and I, we coach our kids' sports together. And I'm going to, obviously let you talk here for a quick second here in a minute, and I'll continue talking after that. But Chris, he and his wife Rachel were really the first family that we met when we moved up to Salina, and we immediately connected because Chris also has 4 children, and he also has twins. Their twins are older, so same age as my oldest son, and then they've got 2 more. And so immediately we had a tremendous amount of respect for them for having children after having twins. But the greatest thing about the Cavers are they are totally fine living in chaos, just like us. It's constant. And so when we hang out, it's like Chris is here. If something happens, it's all fine because he'll take care of them.
Right.
But it's never, you know those people where it's like you're on edge all the time because you're not sure what your kids are going to do. And it's like we can be truly authentic with the Caver. So, man, thank you for coming in and
absolutely
shining some light on how we can make sure our homes are safe places for our families. But like I said, I want you to kind of go back, dude. Where are you from? And then, talk to us kind of through your role models early on and the things, and I'm leading you on to which specific one, but.
So I grew up out in West Texas in Midland. And my dad was a Texas Ranger, the law enforcement kind.
You work with Chuck?
Kind. He, when they were doing I don't know if it was the show or if there was a movie, but he got to kind of come on and consult a little bit. And
did he really?
But
so pretty much Walker Texas Ranger is based on your dad.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Roundhouse, yeah. He's already nuts.
Right.
He was such a big role model for me and showing, just always a heart of service. And even though, I can tell now looking back on it how stressed he was with that job and just how difficult it was. But he sacrificed that to serve. And so I think just that heart of service is just innate in us because of that. And so I knew law enforcement wasn't really for me. I didn't want to go that route. But I did have some other family members out in East Texas that were firemen, and they kind of talked to me about the job. And
Yeah, sorry, the mic, yeah, just
Is it sliding on me?
yeah, just there you go.
East Texas, yeah.
So I have some relatives in East Texas that are firemen, and they talked to me about the job and kind of all that's involved in it. And I didn't really have any exposure to it before then, but it sounded awesome. And so I kind of went that route and actually pulled my brother in because he was studying criminal justice. He was going to be a police officer, and I told him, no, I said, this is what you want to do. I promise you this will be more fun. And so he actually got hired on the same department as me, and we've been doing it for, I just hit 13 years. I think he's got 11 or 12.
So you're a captain and you were just promoted, and this is a big deal being a captain within a fire department, right? Above captain, you have what?
So after captain, it would be a battalion chief.
Okay.
And they handle some shift work, but also administrative duties. And then after that, you go to assistant chief, and then ultimately the big fire chief, the big dog. Yeah.
Dang.
So what's the entry level position called?
Just firefighter.
Okay.
Just firefighter tailboard. They're kind of the guys that can either ride on the engines, or they'll be, in our case, we run our own ambulance service, so they'll be paramedics also, ride on the ambulance.
So what's the process of moving up in the ranks? Like, is it a certain amount of time? Is it testing? What is it?
Yeah, it varies by department, but we're a civil service department, and so it is strictly testing based. There's no interviews. There's no scenarios. They kind of take some of the subjectivity out of it, which is good and bad. But but really, that's why I had to study so hard, is because it was all about just that test. Wherever you score on that test, as promotions become available, they'll hire off of that list. It's good for 1 year. So if you don't promote within that year, then you got to take the test again the following year.
Isn't that wild? Like, so you could literally crush the test, right? Score 100%. And you're that next dude in line. But if there's not a captain that either retires or moves, then you got to do it again.
Yeah.
And the test changes. Like,
Keep you on
every
your
year,
game
it's
every
different.
year, huh?
Yeah, and it does happen.
And you took it twice, right?
Not the captain's test. The driver test. The first time I scored, I think it was a 97. And that was good to put me third on the list, and I didn't promote. Only 2 promoted. So it's like, okay, like I got to, you pretty much, it's different than any other test you've studied for, because, in college and stuff, you study just to pass. Right? But this, I mean, I explained to my wife, because she's always like, you know it, you can stop, take a break. I said, no, like, you have to study to score a perfect score. Like that. That's your end goal, because you have to be number 1 on that list to feel confident at all. Yeah,
if you're 5, it was a waste of time.
It could be, yeah. And like, well, I get to do this all over again next year.
Yeah.
So using a little bit of that motivation kind of helps you, like, all right, I got to hammer down and get this done now, so that I don't have to deal with it next year.
Yeah. Walk us through, because coming from California, it's a different process getting hired, just starting entry level into it, because you have to go to the academy and then you test in and then you interview and all that. In Texas, isn't it a little different how you get into fire?
Again, that kind of varies. Like our department, we accepted guys that were not certified in fire or EMS, which worked for me because I wasn't. So I had to find a department that was willing to put me through both. But since then, we've transitioned to now where we require you to have either a fire or a paramedic certification. And I know a lot of cities only want paramedics, or they only want already certified firefighters. So it just kind of depends. Yeah.
Okay. And then, each city varies on what kind of services you kind of focus on. Carrollton, you may be on couple dozen fires a year, right? And then, but most of them are medical calls in a city like Carrollton. And again, for those of you not in DFW, not familiar with that, Carrollton's a suburb of Dallas. It's it's a nice city. Like any city, right? There's areas that maybe are not as nice as others, but you go down to like Dallas, and it's a completely different like focus down there, right? It's all trauma almost in Dallas, right? It's fires all the time. Like, you may get 2 or 3 fire calls a day, a shift, right?
I mean, yeah, they stay busy with their fires, whereas like you said, we just don't get that many.
Yeah.
I think probably about 80% of the calls we make are EMS based. And I think a lot of that's just, our advances in building codes and fire protection equipment. So if they are starting, they're usually put out pretty quickly before we can get there, and we kind of come in and just make sure it's okay. So that's good, but we always enjoy the dirty work. So anytime we get a chance, we're not too upset about it.
So in your department, what does a day to day look like? How many hours are you on? How many hours are you off? What are you doing typically throughout the day? What does that look like?
We're there for 24 hours. So we'll get in at 7 a.m. and we'll stay the entire day till 7 a.m. the next day when the next crew comes on. And during the day we try to stay busy. Sometimes we'll have classes, whether it be EMS or fire classes. We'll try to do some sort of training, and just kind of work on our skills and our crafts, all the while making calls in between. Mm-hmm. But it really is like a home away from home. We'll try to go to the grocery store and get meals for the day, and we'll cook as time allows. Yeah. If we're busy, super busy, we'll go eat out for meals. And we're sleeping there at night. Although I tell everyone it's like I equate it to a mom with a newborn kind of sleep. It's
right.
Like,
yeah,
that's a good point.
I'm about to have to get up in the next 5 minutes. So it's never good sleep.
Right.
But yeah, they kind of, the crew that you work with, they're kind of a second family. I mean, you guys rely on each other so much, and you got to trust one another. And so you build a pretty cool bond. I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very tight-knit, seems like a very tight-knit community. Like a lot of firefighters, I guess because you connect with each other, and even if you're in different departments, it seems like y'all are very, almost like a locker room, back when you were playing ball.
But it maybe even on another level, right? Because if you go into a scenario, I mean, look, the difference is firefighters, police officers, right? There's life and death situations. Where a locker room, it's okay, hey guys, we got to win, right? There's focus on that. And I need to trust you that you've got my back so that we can win. In Chris's scenario, it's I need to trust you so that I don't get in a situation where my kids don't have a father type of deal.
Yeah, no. So that struggle, right, definitely makes you closer for sure too. Yeah, I am curious, is there any preparation for that first call that's just overwhelming? I mean, you kind of almost have to turn it off, that human emotion, I would imagine. What's that like, maybe your first call that you go out that's pretty serious, and how do you handle that?
You kind of have to have a personality of being able to separate yourself from what you're seeing, keep your head clear, stay focused, and do your job. And for the most part, we do a really good job of that. We're able to kind of set that stuff aside, suppress the emotions, work on the things that we've trained on, and after the fact we can address those things, and kind of check on everyone. How are you doing after something like this? We're focused a lot on mental health now.
Yes.
From some of these things that we see, because we do see a lot of tragic things, unfortunately. But we do a lot of training, and we pride ourselves, especially on our EMS, and being able to focus on, okay, we've got a job to do here. So, even though this might be a kid, and he looks a lot like my kid, I can't focus on that right now. I gotta worry about taking care of this kid. I can deal with that later on.
Yeah.
But and we'll kind of talk about when we get into preparing for an emergency in your home. I mean, it'll be the same thing. It's like the more you work on that stuff, it kind of helps you to stay focused and objective in that situation and handle it a lot better.
Yeah, I've got some cousins in the fire department. I've got some friends in the police department, and the phrase I've heard is you're meeting people on their worst days in many cases. And then you have to pack up from that situation, go back to the station, go back to your next, and then you're probably doing it again very soon. So I could see how it could just beat you down mentally. Do y'all have people that you can talk to outside of the department that you can download with?
So we've really, like I said, started to focus more on the mental health side of everything, kind of helping guys deal with stress. I think they've seen a little bit of an uptick in suicide from firefighters, and so we do have an outside party that will, after what they consider a significant event, they'll bring in. We'll sit around, kind of help you decompress. They'll tell you some things to watch out for. Give everyone a chance to kind of talk about how they're feeling, what they saw, and kind of just work together to kind of get those emotions out instead of keeping them bottled in. So that way we can kind of move past it.
Yeah. Is there like a stigma against that, like a macho man type? I don't want to talk to anybody.
I
good.
think it used to be. I think that was kind of the perception. So you didn't talk about that stuff because we're men here. We don't do that.
That's right.
And so luckily we're slowly moving away from that and realizing it's okay to talk about that stuff. That doesn't change who you are, what your capabilities are. Like if anything, that's helping you out, because I'm sure we carry a lot more stress than we even realize.
Yeah.
And doing this job now, I can kind of appreciate my dad. And, our relationship was rocky sometimes. And now I'm able to realize, God, he had so much stress that he couldn't express, that I probably didn't realize. And so now that I'm in it, I'm a little more aware of that. And it also kind of helps me to watch out for that stuff at home. If I feel like maybe I'm being a little too short with the kids and they don't deserve it. And like, is this something I'm bringing in from work? So it's definitely something to be aware of, and I'm glad that it's something we're kind of addressing a little more, being a little more proactive with it. So.
Yeah. Talk about leadership, right? In moving into and being promoted to captain, the leadership responsibility greatly increased. What are some of the things that you've learned, one, prior to being a captain, and you're like, all right, I wish that some of the things that were implemented by the leaders that, led me. And then now that you're there, some of the things that you've learned since being there.
It's definitely different. I mean, before you kind of come in and there's someone else that you're kind of relying on to come up with a plan for the day, kind of what you guys need to work on. And so you can kind of sit back and let them take the reins. But now it's like, I have to be the one with a plan, because if I don't, then no one else will. And so that's been a little different, but just trying to come into it, not acting like, okay, I'm in charge, so I must know everything now, but like knowing that I've still got guys that are very knowledgeable and experienced, and I don't have to know everything. Like I can rely on them for a lot of this stuff, and just kind of let them do their thing without trying to micromanage or it's my way or the highway kind of thing. But so for the most part, it's just been getting to know my guys, knowing their strengths, their weaknesses, and then kind of seeing how I can support them, and because they're great at what they do and they know their job, and so just how I can support them and help make their job easier.
So what you're saying is it works leading from a position of humility and service. It actually works.
That's crazy talk.
That's nonsense.
You mentioned bringing it home and how you separate that. And I can only imagine how difficult that must be for you and for people listening. Maybe they're not in the fire department, but they have other stressful jobs and they're trying to figure out good ways to cope and separate the two. What are some things that you do? What are some active steps that you take on that drive home? Because it sounds like you go from Carrollton back home, which is 30, 40-minute drive. I mean, is that your decompression time? How do you mitigate from and leave stuff at work and not bring it home?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to really just find you something that you can do on your time off to kind of help you to decompress some of that. Like, I know for a little while there, I was trying to play a lot of golf. It's like, this is my outing. This is my time to just kind of go out and get a little, just alone time, just kind of relax, let some of that stress out. So I think just finding an activity that you enjoy doing, just making some time for yourself. And, it helps that my wife, her dad was a fireman also. And so I think she kind of knew.
She gets the.
Yeah, what all was involved, kind of the stuff he dealt with. And so I think she knew it was very important to allow me to just kind of have some me time.
So she's not nagging you for going golfing. This is good for
all right,
you.
you're home for 2 days. Here's you got this, and this I need done before you go back to work.
Yeah, no, that does happen sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah, no, she's been very supportive of.
That's great.
Yeah, find you something that you enjoy doing. Take some time to do that. And going back to like the studying, like she knew how important that was, and so she would take the kids out of the house and just leave me and support me, and that's that's huge. You got to have a good support system at home, no matter what it is you're doing, or else it just adds to the stress.
Sure.
So,
Man, she sounds awesome.
Yeah,
she's not. I'm just kidding. Love you, Rachel. All right, so let's dig into kind of the topic of the day and preparedness. So one of the first times we hung out, Chris and my wife started talking and talking about like just things in the house. Like it blew our minds like on just like basic, simple things and making sure that you're prepared in case of like in a couple of these instances, fire. So let's start on the fire side of it. As in a home or apartment, you know, some basic things, you know, let's just assume that kids are in the home. What are some basic things that individuals can do to position themselves as best as possible in the event of a fire?
I think the most important thing is just to have a plan. You know, most people kind of have the mindset of, that's not gonna happen to me. That happens to other people.
That's
you know,
me.
there's a good chance that they're right. That may never happen to them. Like we said, the fires, they're just few and far between nowadays. But, you know, having that mindset, you're kind of rolling the dice, like just hoping that it doesn't turn out that way. Or they think that, well, it's easy. All I got to do is just get out. Like how hard is that? And that's where I think shows like Chicago Fire have kind of given people a false sense of what it's actually like. Because, you know, they show the inside of a building on fire, and there's just some things burning, but it's clear as day, and, you know, no big deal. But that's not the environment at all. I mean, it's tons of smoke. We have a hard time seeing. I mean, it's just, you don't have all the time in the world. It's not as simple as just dodging all the flame and just walking right out the front door. So you have to come up with a plan. And for us, especially having kids, like it's super important because, I mean, the adults are probably going to panic a little bit, but the kids, 100%, you know, there's no telling what they'll do. And
freeze.
That's, that's a scary moment for them. So just kind of coming up with a plan of what to do in those situations, and then practicing it with them so that they feel more comfortable, you know, when that time comes, and just having that plan, and then over and over and over, going over it, giving them different scenarios, not necessarily just, okay, we're going to do a fire drill, everybody out the front door. Okay, fire drill again, everybody out the front door. But kind of changing it up a little bit, like, okay, the fire's here, where should we exit? And kind of allowing them to work through it and think about, okay, you know, if it's here, maybe I should do this, and using that cognitive thinking. And that way, whenever a fire does happen, because you can't determine where it's going to be, then it allows them to kind of do the same thing. Okay, it's here. I probably don't need to go out the front door because that's where it's at. Oh yeah, I remember I can go out the back door. And so then they'll choose that instead of just reverting to what they've practiced over and over.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. We literally had this conversation like 2 nights ago, kind of in anticipation of this. We're like, we haven't talked to kids in a long time about it.
I haven't said a thing.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
I don't have a plan.
We haven't.
It's not even a conversation. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. How dumb is that?
Yeah.
I've got 3 kids at home.
To your point,
don't
though,
even think about it.
to your point, though, okay, you could talk through it once, right? And that's what this was the first time we've like talked through it. And the responses we got from my 11-year-old and my 9-year-old, and especially our 6-year-old Rocco, my son, is, I'm just gonna punch out the window. That was their solution. Or, you know, like, and then my 11-year-old who's like, all right, maybe that's going to be kind of tough, but like, why don't I just go out the front door? It's like, okay, what if the fire starts in the pantry and the hallway out, you can only go out your window? What do you do? Or the garage, or, you know, there's all these scenarios. Like, for example, our next door neighbor, literally that we share a property line, their house has been struck by lightning twice.
Jeez.
There was another house in downtown Salina last year that was struck by lightning, and pretty much the whole thing burned down. And one of the kids was in the house when it happened. So again, you never know, to your point, like, what is the chance of being struck by lightning? Well, you know what? My next door neighbor, it's been struck twice.
Yeah.
So again, but talking through your kids and then the different scenarios is really important. Is okay, hey, if it's in mommy and daddy's room, and then my 9-year-old was like, well, we'll just go in, we'll go to the safe room. I was like, no. Don't lock yourself into a box. That's not what we want to do. Well, then we'll come get you. It's like, no, look, if mommy and daddy do not come to you, you've got to go outside and you've got to go away from the house and you've got to wait for us. But like, no concept, right? And we gave them a lot, and I'm not dogging my kids, I kind of am, but it's a totally different concept for them. And
how are they supposed to know unless you talk about
what is a scenario? Because they've never ran through
Right.
it.
Yeah, it's funny at school, like growing up at school, you have fire drills. That's what you do. But I've never once.
I don't. Do they still do that? Honest, do they still do it at schools?
Yeah, I think they're required by law.
I think they are. Yeah.
I just remember how many fire drills that we ran through. It was just like, and I don't ever hear my kids talk about it ever. Like the whole stop, drop, and roll deal that we used to go through all the time. Remember those programs? It was
But I've never once done a fire drill at my house. Not even as a kid growing up myself, and certainly never done it as an adult. So
tonight at like 2 a.m.
start
banging pans. There's a fire! There's a fire!
Everybody's gonna die. So when you say have a plan, is that what you're referring to? Like have this discussion with your family. Hey, if there's a fire here, go out this way. Is that what you're talking about when you say have a plan?
Like going over, okay, here are the ways we can get out, whether it be the front door, the back door, the garage. If you have a single story home, you can go out the window. Just kind of giving them these different exit options and then giving them, okay, so if a fire is right here, what exits should we not use and what exits would be best to use? And so they can kind of make those connections. Okay, if it's here, I don't need to go that way. We're creatures of habit as humans.
Yeah.
And so, studies show that we are most likely to try to exit the same way we've come in. And that whether that's the furthest one away, whether it's the one we shouldn't be choosing, whenever there's an emergency, that's what we tend to do is just revert to what we know. And so we're going to use that exit that we came in from. And so trying to keep them from doing that, from just reverting to what they just know, but helping them to stop and think for a second and then make a better choice based off of
well, that speaks to the importance of a plan and practice.
Yeah.
Because if you practice the right way, now you're going to revert to the right way.
Yeah.
So to your point, if you never practice this, you've never talked about it, how's your 9-year-old going to know? I don't need to go to the safe room. I need to go. Yeah. So that's just it's so dumb.
Yeah.
Like,
it's similar to like football. Like I'm sure you guys, those high stress scenarios, a 2-minute drill, like that's the stuff you hammer over and over. So that way when you're confronted with it, you're able to stay calm, you're able to think through it and make the right choices.
Yeah.
And so it's no different here. Like that's a high stress situation. So the more you work on it, the more calm they're going to be able to stay. They're going to be able to think through it, and that's going to ultimately lead to a better outcome.
So I do have a 2-story house, flex. And my kids,
I don't think that's a good thing.
And my
I think
kids,
peasants only buy 2-story houses now.
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Chris. I know you have a 2-story house.
And
too.
all my kids sleep upstairs. So my wife and I are downstairs. They sleep upstairs, and they're 6.
Do you not
3,
love your children?
Yeah, that's right. The newborn's with us, but the 6 and the 3-year-old are upstairs. So they can't get downstairs. What's the conversation there? They're both their windows face. I mean, I guess there's a roof portion that they could step out onto, but what's the conversation with those two on a second floor?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly my situation. All our kids are upstairs, we're downstairs, and we've kind of got that open area concept so that any fire downstairs, all that smoke is just going upstairs. So there's a good chance they're not going to be able to get downstairs. So that's where, as a parent, you kind of have to have a backup plan where you can tell them, hey, if you open that door, the door feels hot, don't open it. If you do open it, you see a lot of smoke starting to come in, shut it, and just stay put.
Talk through that. Okay, you just said open the door. And this was one of the things that you shared with us because our kids love sleeping with their doors open. Yes. They don't like the door closed. Talk through the kids' rooms doors being open versus closed.
So we do teach we call it a close before you doze, where we stress the importance of closing doors before you go to bed. And the reason is and there's a really good picture that shows 2 bedrooms that are side by side in a hallway, and one door closed and one open, and they have a fire in the hallway, and you can see just the amount of damage done to the door that was open versus the door that was shut. And so just by closing that door and isolating yourself, it buys you so much time. So the fact that they're going to be asleep, they may not know when, it may be too late by the time they wake up to these smoke alarms. Having that door shut is going to keep them safe, keep them isolated, and buy them a lot more time than if it was open and already starting to fill up with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like some things you can have on hand in preparation of a fire. Like I remember as a kid, there's some class, maybe elementary school or middle school, talked about like these fold-out ladders that you can put on your second story. What are some just basic stuff that you can have on hand for this type of situation?
I mean, the biggest thing that we cannot stress enough is smoke detectors. I mean, there's so many homes that I go into that detectors have been disconnected.
Yeah, but when they beep when you're trying to sleep,
Oh,
because you haven't replaced the battery.
which, let me tell you, Rachel hates that sound more than anything.
Yes.
Like if someone was wanting to torture her,
Yeah.
they put her in a room with a beeping low battery alarm, like she'd turn on all.
Do y'all
that.
watch Modern Family? That show, Modern Family?
Yes.
There's a good episode. The whole episode's about
Dude, I've lived that episode more times.
trying to figure out which one.
I've lived that episode more than I'd like to admit.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
Continue.
but those are so important because it gives you that early notification.
Yeah.
And I kind of put my lab coat on here. And, there's a lot of science to all this, and which I had no idea till I got into it, and it's really been kind of fascinating. But fires today are so much different than they were even 30, 40 years ago. There's a video that shows a room that is furnished with like couches and things that you would have found in the 80s. And then there's one that has more modern day furnishings. They light the same fire in the same place, and they show a side by side of how long it takes each room to flash over, which is when the entire room is involved in fire. The home with the 1980s legacy furnishings, it takes about 25 minutes for that whole room to fill up. The one with the modern stuff, it took it about 3.5 to 4 minutes.
Oh my
What?
gosh.
And it's just due to all the synthetics that materials are made of now, the plastics. The stuff is breaking down a lot faster.
Wow.
In fact, like most of the smoke you see coming out of a building from a fire is not from the fire itself. It's from the materials around that are breaking down, releasing those products in the air.
Before the flame even touches it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
And so, and that smoke it's toxic. I mean, that's what most people who succumb to a structure fire, like it's the smoke inhalation. It's not the flame. And it's just because there's so much of it. It's so toxic. It's got those, gases in it, the tars, the oils. I mean, just everything that, so just one breath and it's going to render you, unconscious. So those smoke detectors are such a big deal, making sure that the batteries are good. It used to be, change the batteries every time you change your clock. But, most of the detectors now are hardwired to the home, and the battery is just more of a backup. So really, if you're just doing that once a year, changing those batteries, that should be plenty. But also making sure they're in the right locations, making sure that they're still, if they still work.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that
You actually have to test
detectors,
them.
that they only have a shelf life of maybe 10 years, but really you're looking at probably like 6 to 8 years. And they need to be replaced after that. And they should have a date on the back of them. If you're not sure how old yours is, you can just pop it down, look, and see that date written on the back. And yeah, once you hit that time, it needs to be replaced.
That's a good point, because we bought a house a year or 2 years ago, and we were the second owners. The original house was built, I think, 2004, and so these are all original. I'm imagining original. So that's a good point of it's not even something I thought about. Let's go check the. What about? So you said fire alarms. What are some other things equipment wise that you can have on hand?
It's always good to have some sort of extinguisher in the home, especially near the kitchen, because the kitchen is where about 50% of home fires occur. So just having one within reach, and that's something that you can go buy at just a hardware store, just a small. We recommend like an extinguisher that's rated for an A, B, or C fire, so that'll cover your ordinary combustibles like your wood and your paper. But also you can use it on an electric fire. So if you have an electric outlet, obviously you don't want to throw some water on that. So the ABC is really just a dry chemical, just powder, kind of ones you see mostly on TV. But so having that is one that you can use on multiple types of fires, and so it's a little more foolproof. So if you're going to get one, that's probably the way to go. And yeah, having it within the vicinity of the kitchen is probably best.
Yeah.
But just something that's accessible, and you got to check that thing every now and then too.
Yeah.
If you don't, I mean,
Yeah. So it was funny when we were having this conversation, a grease fire came up, and my
Water.
wife's
More water.
like, yeah, you just put water on it. The sink's right there. And I was like, oh my gosh. So what is something to have? Like, let's just say you don't want to, you've got a flame in a pan and it's starting to get bigger and you're like, oh crap. Like, but I don't want to blast my kitchen with a fire extinguisher. What are there any other, like maybe household things that you can use to put out a fire, like a grease fire or something like that?
Yeah, if you've just got like an oversized lid, something that's going to cover it completely and exclude that oxygen, that'll help smother it. We've had a home where I went in and just got one of their dish rags, got it wet, and then just laid it over the top. Or I have seen they do make. There's a company that makes fire blankets.
Okay.
And there's some that a lot of people attach to like the side of their fridge or in the pantry door. And it's in a nice, neat little package. And if something happens, you just pull it out, unfold it, and just lay it over the top. Really, all you're trying to do is just find a way to smother the fire, exclude the oxygen, and it'll put itself out.
Yeah, you're talking about preparation reduces bad decisions when you're panicked. I panicked one time, and I wish I would have thought of a lid or a rag. I took a big thing of flour and just dumped it on there, and it worked. But now you're cleaning up flour everywhere. So, so Tyler mentioned your neighbors lightning strike twice. That's crazy. What are some of the leading causes of obviously kitchen sounds like is a big one, cooking, things like that, but what are some of the leading causes of household fires?
The majority, like I said, 50% are kitchen related, and then your other two big ones are going to be like candles or heating elements, hot water heater, furnace, that kind of thing, or electrical, electrical shorts. That's usually what we see, just things overheating, burning out.
And yes, older homes maybe are more susceptible to that. But like we have our house was built in 2017, and we had we'd done some work in our like family room, and there was a problem with it, so we had to like pull it out and redo it. And literally, there was one contractor that did it. The second contractor, he came back and did it. And he looked at us and he goes, I don't know how your house has not burned down. And we're like, what? And he showed us, and he had literally just cut electrical wires. He didn't cap it. He didn't do anything. So you're talking like a new home, and it's like right up against insulation, and I mean, it literally could have lit up. And he goes, I don't know how.
Yeah,
I know
that's
what I'm
scary.
saying. And we would never would have thought of that. Like, oh yeah, he took care of it, whatever. Yeah. So I think one thing that I will say, and I'm not an expert by any means, but if you are doing any electrical work, just make sure you've got an eye on them. Make sure that, hey, listen, everything is done to code, because a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, is like, hey, let me get the homeboy hookup from when you're off, you're off your shift, come back and I'll pay you cash to do this. Make sure that it's done to code, because like you say, that could be a huge, huge hazard. And we're just glad that we still have a house.
Yeah, when you're buying a house, especially an older home, is there a way to know, like electrical wire? I mean, obviously you can't be knocking down sheetrock, but is there a way to know? I haven't
bought this yet, but I'm going to cut open this wall because I feel like there's something in there.
Yeah, no, hopefully some things maybe an inspector can identify. But yeah, really, I mean, a lot of the stuff that's in the walls, like, you won't know.
Just buy a new house is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Hope they do a good job.
It's like when I saw a spider, I just burnt my old one down and got a new one.
We had a storm a couple of weeks ago. This is kind of shifting away from fire, but the carbon monoxide detectors started going off. And that's something I don't think about a whole lot either. What's going on there? What are some ways to protect yourself from that potential danger? If you do think something's going, what are some signs and symptoms maybe that something's going on? Talk to us through that.
Yeah, that's an important one to have. And most new homes, I feel like now they're good about putting them in, but you definitely want to have a few of those around, because carbon monoxide, it's odorless. I mean, you're not really going to know you have a leak. But some things you may notice is maybe you're getting a little lightheaded, headache, dizziness. And so having those put in, they recommend having one near the garage. Okay. So, you get all that exhaust. If it starts coming in the home, that gives you kind of an early warning. And then in your hallways, you would think maybe you'd want it near things like your
stove.
Right.
Yeah.
But those are going to emit a little bit anyway, and it's not enough that's going to really harm you.
Gotcha.
So having those too close by, you're more likely going to set them off from time to time. So they don't suggest you put them near those, but mainly in hallways. And for the longest time it was thought, well, carbon monoxide is heavier than air, so it's going to sink low, so you want those down low by the bottom. But that's not the case. It's actually just a little bit lighter than air, so it's going to rise and it's coming from usually a heated source, so it's going to be heated air, so it's going to make it rise more. So that's where having those detectors that are actually 2-in-1, they can do smoke and CO. Those are good to have because they're going to be up high already, and then kind of detect both for you. But yeah, so you want to place them up high, and then they at the end of your hallways by your bedrooms, and then definitely have one by that garage in case you're getting any of that exhaust backing up into the home. It should alert you.
Yeah, oh, that's good.
So you'd mentioned that y'all, 80% of y'all's calls are medical calls. One of the other things that we wanted to discuss was, all right, as parents of kids or young kids or whatever phase you're in, what are some things, based on just your experience and what you've seen and talking through that, listen, it would be very helpful if you had some at least minor training or, hey, here are some things to do in case of X. And the things that come to my mind are, like childhood drownings. If you have a pool or water anywhere near. We had my daughter, we put her in that infant swim and rescue course, which, it's that one that you've seen where the baby learns to flip on its back and float. Our instructor, she lost her, one of her twins to drowning in a bathtub water was 5 inches deep. She ran to the kitchen to get something out of the oven, got it out of the oven and came back. That's the other thing that's to a layman, you don't really think about, but how quickly damage can happen to a child, right? It's not necessarily, oh, hey, they're in the water, they're underwater for 3.5 minutes, but the inhalation of fluids and not knowing how to get them out as well. So as a parent, what are some things obviously you may not be an EMT, you may not be a doctor, but what are some things that we can do to prepare ourselves for that or choking or whatever it may be?
I think the best thing is just, the main two things that can be done at home are CPR and then for choking, Heimlich maneuver, or if it's an infant, being able to flip them on their stomach, doing the back blows. But just refreshing yourself on those things. With CPR, really all we want people to focus on is mainly the chest compressions. They're not
the mouth-to-mouth thing.
They're
is
really
not
about the rescue breaths anymore. Yeah. It's found that we just have to keep the blood flowing.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be fully oxygenated. Just keep it flowing until we can get there,
right,
and then take it from there. But compressions are the main thing that's going to help bring someone back. So, but knowing how deep to push, how fast. And that's something that's pretty easy to find. You can find a CPR class, a refresher course.
Yeah.
But doing something like that just, every year, every couple of years just is probably pretty important because luckily it's not a skill that you have to use that often.
Yeah.
So any chance you get to just, remind yourself how to do it and prepare for that is important.
As a parent, what better insurance policy, right, can you invest in? Because if you don't have that insurance, it could be devastating on the other side of it. So I totally agree. And again, with the resources out there, and I'm not saying, hey, go learn how to do CPR on YouTube, but the more you do know, the more exposure to it. So in that scenario, you don't panic. You're like, okay, hey, I know that I've got to do compressions at this rate, at this hard, with this much force, whatever it may be. Because like you said, the more you can do to keep the blood flowing in the event, a child stops breathing, the more you can do to keep that blood flowing. Because, for example, for us, it would probably take a minimum of 25 minutes or so for the fire department to get to our house, just based on where we live.
Yeah.
And so to think about that, if they stop breathing and we don't do anything in between that 25 minutes, it's catastrophic. Yeah. And so what we can do to fill that gap before EMT, the paramedics get there, to be able to either resuscitate or incubate, whatever you do in those scenarios. So,
so early intervention is huge, but at the same time, it's also important for early notification. Whether it be EMS or fire, what you see a lot of times is people trying to solve the problem, which is good, but then forgetting to call someone. And so by the time they realize, I can't fix the problem, I need to call. Well, now, we've lost a lot of valuable time.
Yeah.
And that's just, helping the outcome, not come out so well.
When you call, obviously there's emotions, there's fear, there's all of that, but coach our listeners on, okay, what is the most efficient way to deliver the message? Like, what do you need to say to the 911?
The first thing they're going to ask you is your address.
Yeah.
And that's something that parents need to understand is you need to make sure your kids
That was going to be my next. That was going to be my next.
Because a lot of them probably couldn't tell you what it is, and that's the very first question. Now, luckily, with technology nowadays, like they can
track your phone.
It's usually going to be from a cell phone. They can ping it and have a pretty good idea of where you are. But on the off chance that's not the case, like kids need to be able to cite their address.
Yeah.
And that way they can get someone at least headed in the right direction.
Yes.
So knowing that, and then obviously knowing how to call 911, and then going over what's an acceptable reason to call, what's not an acceptable reason to call. I don't think we deal too much nowadays with the prank calls and that stuff, but just stressing the importance, and again building that confidence in your kids so that they're not afraid to call.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was literally, I was like, as I was saying that, I was like, do my kids know what to say? They know our cell phone numbers because we're really, and my wife especially is very much like, okay, you need to know our cell phone numbers. So if we get, separated or something, our cell phone. So all of our kids know our cell phone. I don't think that for sure the twins would not know our address. So what happens if something happens to me, like, with the tractor or something like that, and I whatever, and I can't call, and the only people that are there are my 6-year-old. Like, do they have the ability? We've never talked about that.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Great point.
Yeah. Talk about 5 and 6 is probably about where they're going to be able to do that and got to start it. And something else a lot of people don't think about is everyone's got their phone locked these days with a passcode. Might not be a bad idea for your kids to know
how to do the emergency, or the emergency call too, right? Because at least iPhones, right? You've got the emergency deal, so teaching them how to do that. Because I think you touch the button like 3 times or something like that.
Yeah.
What's scary about this conversation is everything you're saying should be mostly common sense or mostly, but I'm sitting here thinking about all the things that I have not covered. Now, again, my 6-year-old is my oldest, so he's just now starting to be that age, but still, like, the simple as telling what my phone code lock is, right? That's never come up. We've never talked about what do you do. In fact, I don't even remember why we were talking about it, but the other night was the first time we've had a fire conversation with them when we were laying in bed. And so all these things that you're talking about, it's not rocket science. But for whatever reason, I just don't put any importance on it.
It's just not a priority because you just don't ever assume you're going to have to deal with it, and most people don't, luckily. But on the off chance that you find yourself in a situation where you do, having gone over this stuff, man, it makes a world of difference.
And we talk about it all the time, serving your community, serving your family, being a leader. This is a simple way to be a leader in your household is by covering these things and being a leader in your community. Another basic thing I want you to go over, if you don't mind, is like a preparedness box, perhaps, flashlights, emergency lines, something like. What are some good things to have in a preparation, maybe first aid kit? What are some good things to have in a preparation box in case something does go down, fire, storm, something like that?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Just having some flashlights on hand, batteries, that kind of stuff. First aid kit is always really good. Something most people probably don't have in their first aid kit, which we would suggest would be a tourniquet. Because again, that's something where early intervention, that's going to make a world of difference. Everything else, you're kind of limited on what you can do. But if there's a serious bleed that you can stop right away, having that tourniquet there to throw on, makes a huge difference. So having something like that in there, we recommend having some sort of fire safe where you can keep all your important documents, things like that inside the home. That's going to help prevent them from getting damage from whether it be smoke, fire, or the water that we're using. That's a big thing too. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, personal preference on the supplies for things like that. But as long as you've got some of those basic things, especially with that first aid kit, some stuff, then you'll be in a good spot.
Talk us through, we're in North Texas, and Texas, Oklahoma, Tornado Alley, right? So we get extreme storms. Talk through maybe we have so many people moving in, and us included, we never, growing up, never dealt with storms like this. And so we were that family that was like, you know, all huddled up in the pantry, and there's like glass all above us, you know, and it's like, what is going on? But like, maybe talk through some of the things that you've seen and that you've learned, like, okay, look, prepare for a storm, like whether it be wearing a bike helmet or shoes, or what are some things to, like, as you're preparing for those?
Yeah.
This
is where you should have brought Rachel in. You know, she's the weather nut. Every
That's
time,
true. She has these apps that I'm like, what is this? She's like, oh, this dude. She like follows these like weather specialists on like, and like the stuff that they're predicting, like the last snowstorm. She like 2 weeks before goes, hey, it's snowing in 2 weeks, and I'm looking at it, and it's like, Rachel, it's supposed to be 76 degrees. What are you talking about? And I like gave her such a bad time, and literally we had the ice storm, and I was like, how the hell? She goes, well, this dude, and you were saying this dude, and I was like, oh, okay. So anyways, you're right.
And every time we'd buy a new home, she would make it a point to go, okay, that's where we get in the event of a tornado. Like that was always a big deal to her.
Yeah.
And so she's
good for
I don't know
her.
if it's fear
Yeah.
or what, but actually the only 2 times that I can think of recently where we've had a warning and they kind of had to take cover. Of course, I'm on duty. Like it always works out that way.
Always.
So she's sending me a picture of them. They're in the closet. They've all got bike helmets on. They got their iPads. She's trying to keep them calm. And but yeah, I mean, find you a room somewhere in the center that's away from the exterior walls. Bathrooms work well because you can kind of anchor yourself in that bathtub or to a toilet, something that's got piping, and then helmets. Or if you want to cover yourself up with like a mattress or something that you can get on top of you to prevent anything heavy
Debris.
from falling on you. That's super important.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, Tyler. You took that next step and built out a little safe room for yourself and shelter room. So
and that's it. Look, and not everybody has the opportunity for that. But if you do, that is something that's just given my family so much peace.
Yeah.
Right? It's been a game changer, and we've been in it twice since we had it put in like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's and again, nothing. I mean, tornadoes have touched down and damaged homes. Yeah, I guess twice in the last year. Like it's touched down in Salina, like a couple of neighborhoods over from us. So it was close. I mean, it wasn't like immediate danger, but again, just the amount of peace that it gives you.
I think today's theme and this whole series theme is just thinking about things that you don't think about. As dumb as that sounds, it's you got so many worries in your life, right? I want to keep my kids safe, and I want to make sure they do well in school, and there's just so many things going on in your mind. But it's the simple stuff, everyday stuff that we can do in our home to be good leaders, be good parents, and take care of really truly take care of our kids. And that's my biggest take home is this the preparation of having these conversations. Don't make assumptions that your kids will know what to do or where to go. You have to have these discussions and practice it, right? That's another thing is talk about it, but actually walk through it. And it may feel weird. Yeah. Right. It may feel
the kids actually would love it. I mean,
I'm sure
I can imagine, right?
But actually practice it. Actually go through the steps, because again, you don't want to, the first time you're going through something, to be the actual emergency and the actual situation where you need it.
Right. Well, when you practice, you could like light your curtains on fire. So it's like real life scenario, like a simulation.
I may stick with the pots and pans, but
just chaos training.
But yeah,
it's not just cost you 30 or 40 grand, but
and it's not something you have to do every single day.
Right.
You know, like we said, once you go over it, just refreshing every once in a while.
Yeah.
And just that alone, is just going to give you such a peace of mind. It's going to help them feel more confident. I have a couple of my girls are a little more on the anxious side. And so, going over this stuff with them makes a world of difference, because now in their minds, okay, we have a plan. We're a little bit safer than we were before.
Yeah. Imagine how much anxiousness you can help solve by having a plan, being prepared. Anxiousness comes from a lack of preparation. And so just having those discussions, think about what they can do for your kids and easing their mind.
Yeah, and there's definitely a difference between talking about it, because that's when kids' minds go wild, right? Like their imagination kicks in, and like worst case scenario. But like physically, just like a couple times a year, right, is you actually walk through it. Okay, hey, look, here's a scenario, fire's here, go through here. Like then it's like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. Like I can get out fairly easily or fairly quickly. Or hey, I know how to pop that screen out of my my first story window. Like I'm not totally freaking out, because my kids are like, oh, I can't open the windows. I was like, they slide open, bud. No, they don't open. I was like, they do. look. Oh, and like you could just see
He's
him
like
just
grabbing the chair and ready to throw it through the
just
window.
because they'd never opened them, right? We're me and my wife are the only ones that ever open it, and so they're just like, I have no idea how to do this. So
Yeah, just another scenario of let your kids struggle a little bit. Let them figure it out, right? Walk them through it. Hey, figure this out. Like, I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah, develop those problem solving.
Right.
abilities.
Yeah.
no, that's
And
good.
you know, something else too is when you do these drills, like actually activating the smoke detectors, it makes a big difference. Because you think about it, that's not something they ever hear. They'll hear the chirp,
true.
low battery chirp,
Yeah.
but have they ever really heard it fully activate? Because that can be a little rattling. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
in fact, we did it. I did it the other day on April Fool's
Yeah.
to kind of mess with them. And one
It's
of my
not something to
nieces,
joke about, Chris.
One of my nieces was there. Well, I mean preparedness. What did I say?
Preparedness. He was.
It wasn't
planned.
April Fool's. It just happened to fall on April 1st.
April Preparedness Day.
April.
But I had a niece that was over, and so I hit the smoke detector. They all started going off. My kids, it didn't really phase them, but my niece, she started freaking out, like crying, covering her ear. Like you just tell it's something she'd never experienced, and so you could see the difference in the panic in one kid and the calm in the other. And so, that's where you see the results of doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Man, that's
Yeah.
good.
No,
Man,
that's
this has
awesome.
been awesome. This is.
Again, so much stuff. Like,
Yes.
and we've been friends for years, and we talked through this. There's so much stuff I learned today. I didn't even think the 911 thing and teaching your kids. That's something I haven't even thought about.
No.
I mean, my older kids know to call 911, but I don't know if they'd be able to deliver a coherent direction.
But to the point he made earlier, getting to the phone to be able to call 911, they don't know my code and my wife's
Because we don't
code.
have house phones anymore, right?
No,
I mean,
you
very
don't.
few.
It's all cell
they're
phones.
few and far between.
So,
Or
we
even
don't.
going to the next door neighbors if it's not a
Yeah.
fire necessarily, but
Yeah.
maybe somebody collapsed or something going to the next door. Even
Yeah.
that, having a conversation
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
good,
it's again, I feel like I palm to the forehead here.
Yeah,
'cause
it's simple stuff, but it's super important.
yeah,
No, that's
absolutely.
good, man. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming down today and spending part of your day off. We got a game tonight. Maybe we'll see how these Storms do, but thank you, man. Honestly,
absolutely.
I think this will make a huge impact to a lot of people, and just I can't encourage all of you listening right now to just don't just let this go. Like, really do something about it. Like,
Yeah, it's not hyperbole to say that this
Yeah.
conversation will save lives.
Yes.
I know that for a fact. There will be a life saved because of conversations like this. And so we
what does
appreciate that.
hyperbole mean?
Like being over dramatic, right? Exaggeration,
All
doesn't
right,
it?
good. No, I was just
I think so. I think that's what it means.
just testing.
Don't give me an English lesson.
I knew the answer. I was just seeing if you knew the answer.
Yeah, and I will add, if you're looking to try to come up with some home plan or just don't know where to start, like you can go to nfpa.org. That's the
NFPA?
NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, and they have a whole home planning section where they kind of talk about things to talk with your kids, some
Perfect.
ideas, and there's some good resources for people who are kind of looking at a place to start.
That's
Yeah.
nfpa.com.
Yeah,
.org.
.org, sorry. Sorry,
And
already blew it.
yeah, it's official if it's .org, so they know what they're talking
Organization.
about. Yeah, but no, that's good. And I'm assuming that through there maybe there's products that they can say, okay, hey, like the fire blanket or things like that. If you're looking at like equipping your home with things that help you in preparedness, that you may be able to find it through there. Just Google it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's like anything, though, right? You can have all the knowledge in the world, but
Yeah.
if you don't apply it, you
Yeah.
don't put it into action, it's no good. So
Yeah, exactly.
this has been great, man. This
Awesome.
has been a great wake-up call for me. So appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, it's fun, man. I love it. All right. Well, hey, appreciate y'all for joining us today.
Share this one for sure.
Share it for sure. Share it with your friends that have kids. Share it with your friends that don't have kids, because again, you never know. I mean, you talk about the carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, first aid kits. I mean, applies to everybody. So make sure just share this out there. We appreciate y'all.
Sorry, one last thing,
yeah.
Because, and I know you don't.
He always has to get the last word.
Yeah,
in.
that's it.
I literally was closing the show.
This is important. This is important. And maybe you're going here, so I apologize if you were, but
No, I was literally ending the show. I wasn't going anywhere.
I know you don't do it for the praise or for the honor, but seriously, thank you for your service. Thank you for all your teammates. Y'all don't get enough credit at all. Firemen, police officers, public servants don't get enough praise. So I just want you to know that we appreciate you. Our community appreciates you and all your teammates. Because
Absolutely. Thank
it's
you.
a
we
very
love what we do.
yeah, it's
I mean, you ask
underappreciated
any
job.
of them, that we'll all tell you it's the best job in the world.
Yeah.
We all love what we do.
No,
No, I
thank you
love
so
it.
much.
I wasn't going there, so thank you for doing that. I apologize. I look like an a-hole now. I was ending it
You were
without
just taking all
without
the
thanking
information.
him. We make our kids, every police officer and firefighter they see, every time, thank you for your service.
That's awesome.
Every time. And here I am, not leading by example. All right, Chris, man, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.